No one here knows, but the original climax in the Zemeckis-scale original Back to the Future script was that they stick Michael Fox, the character Marty McFly, into a Kelvinator, a little refrigerator, and they take it out to the Nevada test site where they're going to detonate the very first atomic bomb. And they put the refrigerator into a home with those mannequins and the food to see what radiation does to to pork chops and and it was all sort of, and it was arranged that that's how he was going to find transport back to his time, and we couldn't afford it. It was just too expensive. And so the whole sequence with the clock tower came into being, and the clock tower on the back lot. And I think because Christopher Lloyd was being talked about as the first choice to play Professor Brown, the word Lloyd clicked something off in Bob and Bob's mind, and they came up with the idea of having Chris Lloyd hanging from the clock, as Harold Lloyd did in his great film, and that's really, I think, where it came from. I really believe that if Christopher Lloyd hadn't been involved as a choice for Back to the Future, that might never have triggered the image of the clock. I find with sequels that the best sequels are the films that are entirely different than their predecessors, entirely different. And the worst sequels are the ones that just essentially come off the same meat hook. The shank you didn't use the last time. And like I think Godfather 2 is one of the best sequels ever made. It was not Godfather 1. If you look at the pictures side by side, it had the same look, but that's where everything, I think stopped. Even stylistically, it was a completely different film, at least for me. I think sequels, in a way, can be very dangerous because they compromise your status or your self-esteem as an artist. And there are people who will make sequels because they make money, and we all also try to make a living, as opposed to as well as make advancements in the creative arts. We're still trying to make a living. But I think the sequel to E.T. would do nothing but rob the original of all its good memories. Because if you make a mistake with the sequel, it is the most recent representation of who E.T. is. And people only remember the most recent representation. I was in Hawaii trying to vacation a number of months ago with Richard Dreyfuss when 4 kids, about 8, 9 years old, came up to us on the beach. And then they said, weren't you in Jaws? And Richard said, yes, I was in Jaws, very proudly. He said, this is the director. And he said, oh, hi. He said, we really love Jaws. That was a great movie, especially the scene where the shark jumped out of the water and attacked the helicopter and drug it down. and Richard immediately stood up and said, look, you go tell your mother to spend $4 lousy, go rent the cassette of Jaws 1 and look at the movie. And I don't want to talk to you until you've seen the first picture. Planning shots to me, or where to put the camera, is something that I think I do intuitively. I don't think I do a lot of planning. My storyboards in no way are about where the camera should go. The storyboards only show me what I need to accomplish to tell the story, or what I need to, the story points in the scene, what needs to be told. That's all the storyboards show. Rarely does the storyboard show an angle or an idea that will be part of the cutting, or what lens I might use, wide to long focal length. It's mainly just to help me tell the story. And it also helps me never look at the script again, because I tend to memorize everything. When I direct, I memorize every line of dialogue, and I pretty much have the whole script. And it just happens. I assimilate it. I don't study it. It just comes in, flows in one ear, and when the film's over, it goes out the other, and I don't remember a line from the picture. It is truly the greatest art form, ever invented. I mean, it's much better than cave paintings, and it's a lot better than mud wrestling. And there's just something about being able to do everything. It's something about being able to be a painter and be a writer, and to be able to be a musician, which you have to be when you have to have a great sense of music to be a filmmaker. You'll wind up, otherwise you'll wind up giving your film away to a composer who will make his own movie out of it. It's nice to know enough about music to have a collaboration with the composer. But you get into all the arts in filmmaking. It's the only technology that's ever brought every art form into one, arena, one place. Yeah. Whether they write or not, people who have a great understanding of the script make the best filmmakers, I feel. Make the best directors. Because directing isn't just where to put the camera. I mean, I thought it was for years. I thought I was getting jobs because I knew where to put the camera better than anybody else of my generation when I was 22 years old and working at Universal on television. That's why I thought they were hiring me. And as I discovered, that's why they were hiring me. I was just, doing a lot of flashy stuff, and they said, "Oh, get him on this show. It's a flashy show. Get him on this." And that's just style, and it's the content that I think it makes the major impact. There's been some films. I mean, I didn't think Preston Sturges was so, amazing with his camera, but Preston Sturges made some of the best movies ever made. I don't know any hacks. It's the whole thing. I don't really know any hacks, or I don't think there's any such thing as a bad director. You believe that, you'll also believe that.
I was going to say, explain yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that I think there is such a thing as a bad storyteller, someone who just wants to get to the end of the schedule with their life, or with the next job guaranteed, or not getting fired. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons people, they make movies, and some of them are qualified to make them, and some of them aren't. But for me, it's always gone back to how strong the script is, and can you tell the story? And I think a bad director is someone who starts off with a wonderful script and does everything possible to ruin it. And especially when you see some movies and then you go back and read the screenplays, because the writers come to meet with you and they say, "Please don't judge the film. Please read my original screenplay." I've done that before. I've read an original script based on a film I didn't like and said, "My God, this would have been great in like Scorsese's hands or De Palma's hands. Wow, what happened?" I think that once again, like with writers, it depends on the kid. I don't have a methodology that I impose on every child. Because, your picture is such a unique experience that you have to sort of get to know who the kid is first, who his parents are, what his hobbies are. Henry Thomas from E.T. and Drew Barrymore from E.T. and Heather O'Rourke, who, as you know, died last week. Suddenly, unexpectedly. These were kids who were on the surface extremely, extremely shy. And half of it was in the interview knowing that they had something to give you. Just knowing that there was something there dying to come out, and then trying to get the children to relax in an atmosphere where there could be 75 crew members and they wouldn't be afraid to cry in front of them, whereas they've never cried in front of their brothers, their sisters, their parents, or their friends. That's what's hard with newcomers, is getting them to really open up in front of a lot of people. So it's very important when I make a film with kids, I go around the crew. I mean, Alan might have told you this, and I say to everybody, make friends with the kids. I say to the grips, to the electricians, to the camera operator, to everyone on the set, to please make friends with the kids and make them feel like, we're all part of a family here. And the work itself is all different. Sometimes I imitate, sometimes I'll play the scene for the kid, and they'll watch me play it, and they'll say, "Really, you want me to do it that way?" But I pretty much know what I want. I certainly did with Christian Bale on Empire of the Sun. I really knew what I needed from Christian, because he was sort of playing me in many ways, and at least how I saw myself as a child. He was playing the child I always wanted to be. I always say about Christian, he was the kid I always wanted to be and never could be, because I wasn't brave enough or good-looking enough, or didn't have enough of a sense of humor. I mean, he's a great find, and we were very lucky to find him. But it's a real mixed bag of just being completely flexible. And the most important thing is patience. You've got to have so much patience. You cannot ever get angry at a child, or you'll lose the child for maybe the rest of the shoot. You can never yell at a kid. I made the mistake one time, and Drew Barrymore, when she made E.T., was 6 years old. And Drew was she was mischievous for most of the shoot. And I let it get to me one day, and she was not remembering her lines, and she was purposely not standing on her mark, and I knew she was being hostile about the whole thing. And instead of sending her to lunch and just walking away, I kind of, like her father, took her into another room and yelled at her and scolded her. you know, and I said, she was 6 years old, and I was saying, you have a responsibility here. There's people working very hard to make a movie here, and you're the center of attention, and you can't let us down. And oh, and then the tears came. Then the tears came, and that's when I really felt like, you know, Simon Legree, and I just skulked out of there. She cried, and I skulked out of there, and came back, and I apologized to her. And when I apologized to her, she cried even harder. So and after that, it was fine. I didn't lose her, but I felt that it's a real danger. You must never scold a child. You can scold the child's parents all you want. And I do that often. E.T. first came to me quite seriously when I was about 8 years old. I know it sounds crazy to go back that far, but I had an imaginary friend when I was 8 years old who was from space. He was my spaceman friend. And I used to, you know, really imagine him as, I was kind of a weird kid anyway, even at 8. I was a pretty weird kid that didn't have a lot of friends, and I had this little spaceman friend. And so it was, I took my spaceman friend so for granted that I didn't even think of making a movie about him for many, many years. Or when I got into movies to begin with, and I was making, you know, in the Boy Scouts, 8mm films, I never considered making a picture about my best friend because he was just my id, and I didn't think of, you know, hiring him. You know? And then I became so fascinated with the whole UFO phenomena in the very early 70s that when Close Encounters was spawned, I couldn't wait to get to the end of Close Encounters because I introduced E.T. When you think about it, I introduced E.T. in the last scene of Close Encounters when the creature we call Puck, you know, walked down the gangway and came over to Francois Truffaut and did the Kadai hand signs and returned to the ship. And that's where I first said to myself, what if E.T., what if that little extraterrestrial did not get back on this ship? What if he wandered off into the forest surrounding Devil's Tower and got lost? And that's where E.T. was born. E.T. was born at the same, the E.T. that I made was born at the same moment I was physically, you know, writing Close Encounters. And then it was just a matter of, and I resisted making E.T. because I didn't want to make Close Encounters and E.T. back to back. So I put a few things in front of it, ahead of it, and then on Raiders in 1980, I pretty much had fleshed out the story and went over to Melissa Matheson, who had written Black Stallion and was at the time Harrison Ford's friend, and she was on location with us most of the time, and I just loved her writing on Black Stallion, and I asked her if she would write this for me, with me, together, whatever. The book was first given to me by Kathleen Kennedy, who's the president of my company. And she gave this to me, and she said, look, you're going to think I'm crazy, and you're probably going to hate this book. But if you don't hate this book, I think this will make a wonderful movie, and I think you should direct it. And I had no idea what The Color Purple was, and I took it home. She gave me some background, and she said, you know, it's a black story, but you know, that shouldn't bother you because you're Jewish, and you know, essentially you share many similarities in your upbringing and your heritage, and including segregation, prejudice, and everything else I had to go through when I went to one high school, which I won't mention. Kathy knew I had some anti-Semitic experiences when I was growing up that Kathy knew about, and she said, you know, read this. Some of this will be very familiar to you. And I read it, and it was, and I was, I loved it, and I loved the book very much. And I didn't want to direct it. I just loved the book. It was a nice reading experience, and I didn't really think of pursuing it. And I picked it up again about a month and a half later and read it a second time. And couldn't get away from, there were certain images I couldn't get away from, out of my mind. And I remember just saying to Kathy at the time, well, maybe I'll just develop the script and take it to the script and then get out. First, I had to get Alice's blessings because Alice had a lot of control of the project. She had director approval and she had screenwriter approval. And that's a lot for a novelist to get. But that's what I'm talking about, holding yourself. Don't just sell your stuff. If they really want it, if they really want it, you know, ask for a few more things than you might think reasonable. And so they might think reasonable, right? So she, so I met with her. Quincy Jones and I flew to San Francisco, and I met with Alice. And I thought it was a terrific meeting. I told her essentially what I wanted to do with it as a film. I didn't hold back because I didn't care, and I cared a lot about the book, and I cared about what she was trying to say with it. But I didn't care whether I directed it or not. I wasn't auditioning for Alice. If she said, look, this is really nice, but I really want Lumet or Poitier to do it, she could have insulted me. I wouldn't have cared. I was so excited about meeting her. I read some of her short stories. I did some research on Alice Walker, and she is a brilliant, brilliant author. And there is something a little bit intimidating about her, just her attitude, which is sweet and wise. You know, for her young years, you know, she is very wise and she's very kind. There's a kindness to Alice too, which I really respond to in people. And I think we hit it off in that sense. And then there were no problems. And Alice wanted to prove the screenwriter, and I begged Alice to do the screenplay. I said, you must do the first draft. And I said, if for no other reason, I want you to do the first draft, so if it doesn't work and you don't like it and we don't like it, when you'll understand how difficult the process is in translating your book to the screen, because I felt it was a horrendous translation. I mean, the problems were horrendous to translate from letters to a motion picture story. And so Alice took a crack at it, and she wrote a first draft screenplay. And she, even before sending it to me, said, I do not want you to shoot this. This isn't good. But thank you for giving me the chance to write it, and I learned a lot writing it, and I think I'll stick with literature. And then that's when I hired Menno Meyjes, and we spent a year on the screenplay. It was just a year working on it. You know, I have sort of a classical musical background. My mother was a concert pianist, and for many years, when I was a child, she was a professional, and she would go around, doing concerts and playing on television shows and things like that.
You play any instrument?
I played clarinet and bass clarinet, and so I played clarinet then, and so I came from a very musical family. I've just always loved. I used to collect soundtracks, and when I was a kid, my first soundtrack was Destination Moon by Lee Stevens. And I would take the soundtrack, and I'd often listen to it, and I would think of a movie story based on the inspiration that came from the music. I would let the music wash over me, and I would think, oh, yeah, Western, oh, yeah, good. And I'd be 12 years old and be making these movies based on soundtracks. And by the time I was about 17, I must have had 150 soundtracks. All I do is I spent my money on soundtracks and raw stock when I was a kid, my allowance money, that's it. And Johnny and I we've done every film but one together. If you don't count every film that I've directed, we did everything but Color Purple we did together. And our relationship at this point is like shorthand. It's like just two psychics, John seems to know what I want, and I know what he wants to do, and it's not very verbal anymore. It's great that way. I think it was very verbal in the sense on Empire because John had never written a liturgical score before, and I never wanted one, so that was a whole new experience for both of us to have the choir and to do it that way. And that was something that I had wanted to do. That was part of the concept. When I read the book, I kept hearing choir music throughout the entire movie. That was one of the, when you first get inspired to direct something, you read a book or you read a script, you have an image, and that was the first image I had when I read Ballard's book was church music throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, the Jaws theme, that was his idea.
All his. I didn't even like it when I first heard it. When he played it for me, no, I hated it actually.
Do you like it now or no?
I love it now. It's great. But I do. I love it. It's great. And it saved the movie. He saved my movie with those notes. But when I first heard it, I thought he hadn't understood the picture because he saw a rough cut, and he called me up and he said, I got the theme. I came over to his house, and he just used two fingers. He just used two fingers. I thought it was chopsticks. I wanted to play the top part, I wanted to play with him on the piano and laugh. He wasn't laughing. He said, this is how I see your movie. And I said, but John, what about some complicated stuff? How about something complicated and multi-leveled and counterpuntal and all that? And he said, no, I really think that this is a movie about primal screams. It's about primal screams, and this is primal music. And he played that, and it turned out to be just the perfect idea. I just really believe that the motion picture medium is going to be here for as long as we are here, kind of passing the baton on to the next generation and showing people that you know, it is the greatest art form of the 20th century, and we have to make sure that's part of the 21st century, and we don't become jaded with the... I don't want people to become jaded about going into a collection, a group like this, sitting in seats and watching a movie. What terrifies me is the idea that, and this is going to happen, that TV screens will get larger in the home, sound systems will get better and better, and people will no longer go out. They will only share the mystery with their immediate friends and family, and that's sad because movies are theater. It's just an extension of, from the first time someone, the caveman, made the other caveman laugh by hitting himself on the head with his own club. It's all started there, and I would just hate to see that go away around the campfire with the cavemen all laughing. I would hate to see that go away and become a cloistered experience. And it's really up to you to continue it because you're the next wave. I mean, our wave already broke on the beach. We're just sort of foam now. We're just like washing up and down on the sand. We can knock a few sandcastles down still, but you're the next wave, and this is the generation that I think my generation depends on to employ me when I'm old. So on behalf of George Lucas and myself and Francis Coppola and Brian De Palma, Martin Scorsese, we all expect jobs from you when we're in our area.